Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli here. Man, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Fish My City in Miami, Florida. Let me tell you, I've fished a lot of places in my lifetime, but when I think of a place that has the most amazing saltwater and freshwater fishing in one place, Miami comes to mind. We were there during a time of the year when the fishing is great across the board. And because of that, we decided to challenge ourselves to not catch just 3 bucket list species, but 6 bucket list species. 3 in freshwater and 3 in saltwater. A big mission, a lot of species to catch in only 5 days of fishing, but we made it happen. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the techniques, the baits, and the rods and reels I used in Miami. We decided to go after our freshwater species first, and we fished in a lot of the canals all over Miami. If you look at Miami, if you look at a map, an aerial map of Miami, there are canals everywhere you look, and those canals are loaded with a zillion different kinds of species. And we decided to target grass carp, peacock bass, and a Midas cichlid, which looks a lot like an oversized, overgrown goldfish. But we started with grass carp. And grass carp are in the carp family. They're mainly vegetarians that feed on different grasses and algae. But the guy I fish with, Monster Mike, shout out to Monster Mike, has a system to catch these fish that's really easy. And that's what I love about fishing freshwater in Miami. You don't need a lot of expensive tackle. It's so simple to have the fight of your life. And for grass carp, I kept it really, really simple with using a VMC, a wacky hook. This is an Ike approved wacky hook. And I used it in a small number 1 size. And that was it. Just a hook. And to the hook, I put bread. That's right. Regular, old, edible bread. Day old, week old, it doesn't matter. Grass carp didn't seem to matter. And basically we took that bread and we'd pull a little piece of it off and we would just ball it up, get it into a ball and stick it on that number 1 VMC wacky hook and just kind of throw it out there. And these grass carp would come in. They'd eventually see that bread sort of dissipating and they'd come in and suck it in. Unbelievable fight. Grass carp up to 30 and 40 pounds you can catch this way in Miami. Tackle I used, I took a chance and I went really, really light. I used a 7-foot medium action Abu Garcia Ike Series rod. I used a 20 size Abu Garcia Ike Series spinning reel. And on the line, I went with straight 6-pound Berkeley trilene fluorocarbon. Took a big chance, but I went with that light line to not only have a better fight with the fish, but to be more natural. And that 6-pound fluorocarbon disappears in the water. So all that fish saw was that bread ball. Pretty amazing. The second species we went after was one of my favorite. And the great thing is you don't have to go to South America to catch it. You could catch it right here in the United States in Miami. It was a peacock bass. And we decided to use for the peacocks shiners, a live shiner. And we were using a technique called live lining the shiner. I went with the same hook, a VMC wacky hook, Ike approved, but I went up to a size 1/0 to compensate for that little bit bigger bait. We were actually sight fishing the canals. So we would get on top of the bridges next to the roads and we would see them. And a lot of these peacocks were spawning, they were guarding fry, or they were very territorial. And we were able to live line that shiner. And when that shiner would start moving and it got near that peacock, he would destroy it. Tackle, you don't need a lot of big heavy tackle. I used the same exact setup I used for the grass carp. A 7-foot medium action Ike Series Abu Garcia spinning rod with a 20 size Abu Garcia Ike Revo spinning reel. But this time I had to go up in line size. I actually ended up breaking one off on lighter line, and I went up to 10 pound 100% Berkeley trilene fluorocarbon, and that made a big difference on landing those fish under really tough conditions. Unbelievable fish. Finally, the last species, I call them oversized goldfish, the Midas cichlid. And for the Midas cichlid, we went back to the same technique we used for the grass carp. A small little #1 VMC wacky hook, a little piece of bread balled up, and we really targeted canals that were deeper and had steeper ledges. And because these fish are orange and they're bright white, they're really colorful, you could sort of see them from a long ways off and almost sight fish these Midas. I tell you, I've caught a lot of fish. You'd be surprised how hard a goldfish that big pulls. And it was an amazing fish, and it completed our freshwater bucket list. But there were still 3 to go. And now we switched to the saltwater. And we really targeted 3 of the most iconic saltwater species in all of Florida. We tried to catch a snook, we tried to catch a sailfish, and we tried to catch a tarpon. So 3 very iconic species. And we started with the sailfish. And the sailfish is something I've never fished for them. And it was amazing to learn the new techniques and how to catch these fish. We caught them 2 ways. We caught them using a system called kite fishing. And in kite fishing, you're using an actual kite to keep your bait high up in the water column as you make these controlled trolls around this area. The second way we caught them is live lining. We actually would take a piece of bait, you know, something about that big, and goggle eye or shad kind of species. We'd hook them in the back, and when we'd see a sailfish swimming around the boat, we'd actually throw to it and they'd come up and eat. Pretty unbelievable. But because it was a sailfish, we really had to step up our gear and our tackle. And for the kite technique and for live lining, I used heavier duty saltwater tackle with pretty heavy line. We were using 25 and 30 pound fluorocarbon on a heavy duty saltwater setup. But the hook was really key. And especially for sailfish, because this is all catch and release sport fishing, we wanted to make sure that we never got the hook down deep in that fish's throat. And we used a style of hook called a circle hook. And we used a VMC circle hook. For the sailfish, we used that bigger size. We used a 3/0, a 4/0, and it was the perfect hook. And you never even had to set the hook. When that fish bit, you just reeled, and because of the design of that circle hook, it would catch in the corner of that fish's mouth. You could fight him all the way to the boat, get your pliers, pull it out, and he'd swim away. Sailfish were amazing. The second species we fished for was the snook. And the snook is a really cool saltwater fish. The best way I can describe it, it's like a saltwater largemouth bass. It's got a really big mouth, a big head. It chases things, and we had a really successful day using, once again, live bait. And we used basically live sort of minnow looking shiner baits, and we'd hook them right through the gill, right through the mouth. We'd throw them out there and let them do their magic. Once again, circle hook all the way. I went with that same VMC circle hook, but a smaller size. We used the 1/0 when we were fishing for the snook, and it was perfect for holding that live bait. And when I'd set the hook, I just sort of reel back, and that hook would be caught every time. The rod and reel and the snook, man, it was fun because I just went with my good old bass tackle. But I had to go up in size a little bit on the rod and reel. I used the 7.2 Abu Garcia Ike Series spinning rod, which is a medium, but it's a little bit heavier than the straight medium of the 7 foot. So a 7.2 medium spinning rod, Ike Series. I used the 30 size Abu Garcia Ike Series spinning reel. And then on line, I went with braided line to a fluorocarbon leader. When you're fishing in salt, that braid to a fluor leader is a great combination. I used the Berkley X9 braid. It's brand new. It's such good stuff in the 20-pound tests. And I used a 12-pound 100% Berkley trilene fluorocarbon leader, and that completed it for the snook. Last but not least, and this was a highlight of this show, and it will be a highlight of my life forever and ever, is catching monster tarpon on light tackle. And I was fortunate enough to catch a really big one probably about 110 to 120 pounds on spinning tackle, if you can believe it. And once again, you know, we went with live lining bait, but this time we live lined shrimp, live shrimp. And we went with a 2-aught VMC circle hook, and hooked that shrimp and would throw it out there, and we fished high spots where these tarpon would feed. Just these real subtle high spots where these tarpon would come up and eat. Man, I set the hook on that thing, and probably 30 or 40 minutes later, I finally landed that fish. Rod and reel, we used a heavier duty saltwater spinning setup. It was an 8-foot saltwater spinning rod with about a 40 size saltwater spinning reel. And to that, we used a 20-pound Berkley X9 braid to a 15-pound Berkley trilene 100% fluorocarbon leader. Man, I gotta tell you, one of the most amazing fish catches of my life. Be honest with you, fishing in Miami, one of the most amazing trips of my entire life, fresh and salt. Man, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Fish My City in Miami. I hope you got an idea how easy it is to go fishing in the city. You don't need expensive gear. You don't need fancy baits. A hook, piece of live bait, and a piece of bread, and you're set. Mike Iaconelli, stay tuned for next week's show.